So the ACT has had massive changes on their test. They are calling it an enhanced test. And as of today's recording, I have taken that new enhanced test twice. So this video is going to pretty much summarize what is different about this ACT test and how you can better prepare your child, or you can prepare if you're the student yourself for this next ACT test. So how it has worked is over the last couple tests on the computer-based version only, they have rolled out the new ACT enhanced test, which is why I've taken it. Most of the kids that I've worked with have been taking the paper test. Now in September of 2025, the paper test will have this new enhanced version, and there's actually quite a few differences. I think there's some pros and cons, and so I'm going to kind of go over and hopefully answer some of the major questions. On this new enhanced, or whatever you want to call it, ACT, it is still going to have the option to be paper or computer. I preferred paper because the computer program was really glitchy when I took it, and it actually timed out every 10 seconds, which I'm really hoping that they fix that. The new ACT is still going to be non-adaptive, which is different than the SAT, which means it's not going to be change, the questions aren't going to change based on how a student's answering. That's kind of obvious if it's paper, but with the computer it's a little less obvious. And then what also is really, really unique, and I have mixed feelings about, is historically the ACT has had field questions as the last section of the test that was ungraded. Most of the kids just goofed off and they were not getting great data from that. What they have changed instead with this ACT test is there is field questions built into the test, which just means those questions aren't graded, and we're not going to know which ones are going to be the case. So I'm going to kind of walk through the changes on each section. For English, this is how it's going to work on the English section. I have found it a little bit more easier just because there's more timing. So instead of the original 75 questions, there's now 50 questions and 35 minutes to complete it. Most students will run out of time on the English section, but it is nice to have just a little bit more time. Now for the field questions, they are taking out a whole passage, about 9 or 10 questions on the English section that is not graded. What's also really unique is that there is more detailed comprehension questions on the English section than that is completely different from the original test. Is you're really having to understand the context of what is going on. Some kids do that really well, and then some kids do not. And so I think there's just a little less grammar, but a little bit more on the comprehension side. But overall, I actually found it easier. For the math, they kind of went ham on. So the math is harder. Long story short, there was 60 questions on the original ACT test, and now there is 45 math questions. And what they've done is they've chopped off a lot of the easier ones, and they've sprinkled in some more hard ones, including some pre-calculus questions. Yeah, which is a little bit more stressful. There's 4 field questions on the math test, so less questions, and you have 50 minutes to complete the test. More time, which is nice, but like I said, the material, not all of it is a bit harder. I did see a couple of pre-calc questions, but I don't find it to be still essential to take pre-calc before you take the ACT exam. What I did find really essential is actually using a graphing calculator, and we've been learning more how to download programs onto our calculators that are single function. But honestly, if I didn't have my graphing calculator on the test, I would have struggled. The graphing calculator was a game changer because there's a lot of functions, it's good to visualize, and there's a lot of programs that you can allowedly place on the ACT test. And now if you're asking about is it allowed, so the graphing calculators are allowed. There's just a couple that are not, but they're pretty rare. And then you are allowed to have single function solving programs on your graphing calculator. You can solve for slope. You just can't have CAS, which is a computer algebraic system. Most calculators don't have that. A kid can hack and put ChatGPT on their graphing calculator, but that's just really stupid and obviously not allowed. For the reading, it is the same type of passages, same material. They have removed 4 questions, and it is 40 minutes. So they have gained 5 minutes. It's about the same reading level, which is really lovely. I enjoy the reading section more, having more time to read it. So I think that will help students. The downside of the reading is there's 4 passages, and there's one that they're going to completely not grade. I've heard through our ACT reading training through the ACT, if Like there are certain passages they prefer to remove than others, but I've looked through the ACT test book and I haven't found a true pattern to really like focus on. And then for the science, I thought the science was a little bit harder, but not crazy, just more background knowledge. The blessing is you have more time. You have 40 questions in 40 minutes, and then there's 6 questions that are considered field questions and not graded. So kind of the summary is some things are a little bit harder. I think the reading is easier now. It's just a different game. The key things to prepare is one, get a hold of either like an ACT test book, one of the free practice tests, and just start looking over the differences and adjust like how a student is doing timed practice. I think that is huge. Another thing that we have is we have like ACT AI software, and there is a completely free practice test on there that students can play around and use, and paid modules if interested. One thing that I have found kind of frustrating on this ACT exam is there was a couple of math problems that were way harder than the book that is behind me. So I have like the new book behind me right here. I've ordered it off Amazon. It's from the ACT, but there's just a couple of math problems that were a lot harder than I was seeing in the book. So that's kind of the downside of it. But kind of strategizing, making sure you're managing your time better, and just understanding just some of the nuances and the differences. But if you have any questions that are more specific on the ACT, please comment below. Also, the ACT has done a pretty good job of answering a bunch of questions in their website. This video is being filmed in July 2025, and my Florida students, right now Bright Futures is still requiring the science section. So the ACT is making the science section optional, but until Florida Bright Futures drops that scholarship requirement, please take the ACT science section. And that being said, I look forward to supporting you, and if you have any questions, would love to hear.